everybody, welcome back to the University of Guelph Arboretum. My name is Kitty, and behind the camera there, that's Jenny.
Hello!
And today we thought that we'd talk to you a little bit about an endangered species that makes their home here in the Arboretum, which is pretty special. More specifically, we want to talk about the Monarch Butterfly. So with me today, I have my Butterflies in Your Neighborhood Biodiversity sheets. So we make these sheets in a number of different topics, and you can order it on our website, but I have the butterfly one right now, and we can look right here. This is what the Monarch Butterfly looks like if you haven't seen them before. And you can definitely see these guys flying around the Arboretum. We just saw a couple right before this video, so that's really awesome. So they're definitely around, and that is actually an endangered species, which means that there's not too many of them left in the wild. They are in danger of being extinct or completely gone from the wild, which is not too great. But they make their home right here in the Arboretum, although they don't always look like this. When they are younger, they actually look completely different, because butterflies actually start off their life not as a full-grown butterfly like this, but as an egg and a caterpillar. And one of the best places to look for eggs and caterpillars for monarch butterflies are patches of milkweed plants, because that is the monarch butterfly's host plant. That is what the caterpillar likes to eat. So we have a couple of milkweed plants right behind me here. So let's see if we could try and find a caterpillar on this milkweed.
All right, so we're looking for caterpillars. What are some things to look for?
Yeah, so of course, if there was a caterpillar hanging out somewhere on this milkweed, we might be able to see chew marks on the leaves, because that caterpillar is very hungry and likes to chomp on down. So you might see chew marks like this, and as it's eating and growing, it probably is also pooping a lot too. So we might be able to see some caterpillar poop, and if you see those things on a milkweed plant near you, you might want to take a closer look, because that could all lead you back to a very hungry caterpillar living on that milkweed.
And I think I see our very hungry caterpillar here.
Yeah, so this little guy, he's even chewing a little bit right now. He's just a very tiny little monarch caterpillar. But we can take a closer look on our biodiversity sheet. So I have the caterpillar biodiversity sheet with me right now. We turn it over. This is what the monarch caterpillar looks like. It's a little tough to see on that tiny guy, but they have lots of bands all along their body, and bright yellow and white and black. So that's exactly what he looks like, but just shrunk down a little bit in real life, although he will get a lot bigger as he keeps on eating. Now, of course, monarch butterflies, they start off their life cycle a little bit differently than a full-grown adult butterfly. So if maybe a couple of days ago a monarch butterfly was flying around here, it might spot a wonderful milkweed plant just like this in the side that is the perfect place to lay their egg. And we actually found a monarch egg on that milkweed plant. So let's go on over and try to see if we find it and take a look. Let's see, do I remember where it is?
And the trick with monarch eggs is they lay them typically on the underside of the leaf, and it helps them protect against things like weather and wind.
So there is a monarch egg somewhere on this plant, and our mission is to find it.
I think I see it.
Oh, right over there. Awesome. So it just looks like this tiny little white spot. So that is the egg of a monarch butterfly. Can you believe it? It starts out so small. So once a monarch butterfly lays its egg on a milkweed plant like this, this egg is actually going to hatch into a caterpillar, just like on this plant here. So this little caterpillar it's gonna start eating once it hatches out of the egg. It's really, really hungry, so it's gonna munch away on the leaves and eat and eat and eat, and it's gonna keep on growing bigger. Now the thing is, when we grow bigger, kind of like if you imagine us growing bigger throughout our school years, we have to buy new school clothes every year because we're too big for our old clothes. And that's the case for caterpillars like this too. As caterpillars are growing bigger, they become too big for their old skins, so they have to buy new clothes. And they do this with a process called molting. So when caterpillars molt, they actually crawl out of their old skin that has become too small for them, and they're gonna crawl out with a bright, shiny new skin that they grew underneath. And they're going to be a little bit bigger each time. And each time they go through a molt like this, we call this a different instar. So depending on the caterpillar species, different caterpillars will go through a number of instars. They'll molt a couple of times before they get ready for the next stage in their life. And that is the chrysalis. So monarch butterflies, their chrysalis are really pretty. They're really bright green with a gold band across the top. And inside this chrysalis, what happens is this caterpillar, it's actually going to turn completely into goo. It's going to melt all of its tissues down and turn into a big old caterpillar soup. Except for a couple of cells that are saved. We call these imaginal discs, and they live in the butterfly and caterpillar's body all their lives. And this imaginal disc, they actually take all the energy from the caterpillar soup to reform into all of the different body parts that a monarch butterfly adult has. So it's gonna take the energy from the soup and grow it into wings and antenna and a head and thorax and abdomen and legs and all those things. So from that caterpillar soup, a whole new adult butterfly will be formed. And when it's ready, that adult butterfly is gonna bust out of the chrysalis. It's gonna pump out its wings and dry them out and then fly around and begin the whole cycle again. And that is how the monarch butterfly and other butterflies too live their life, which is pretty spectacular. But of course, all throughout their life cycle, these guys have to protect themselves. They don't want to get eaten by other animals. Of course, a tiny little baby caterpillar like this can be good food for things like birds and other animals that might want a little snack. So they have to protect themselves from being eaten. And they do this with a process called Semantism, which is a funny word, but it means that they use some sort of signal to tell other animals to back off, to not eat them, otherwise something bad is gonna happen. And something bad definitely will happen if an animal eats a monarch butterfly or a monarch caterpillar, because these guys are actually poisonous. Take a look at this caterpillar chewing away at this leaf. The milkweed plant actually has toxins in it. So a lot of animals don't eat this plant except for animals just like the monarch caterpillar. So he's chewing away, he's eating lots, and as he's eating this plant, he's also storing toxins made by this plant into his body. And these toxins make the caterpillar poisonous, and they store this toxin in their body all throughout their life as a caterpillar, as a chrysalis, and as an adult. So they don't want other animals to eat them by telling them that these guys are poisonous. They don't want to eat them because they might get sick. And to tell other animals that, they use their coloring. They have really, really bright coloring. Let's take a look again at the monarch caterpillar. Check out these bright yellows and blacks and whites, the banding all across the body. You think that for a caterpillar to stay hidden, they might want to be more green like these other guys. But these guys actually have super bright colors, so they don't have to stay hidden. And when animals come by, like maybe if a bird swoops by and sees all these bright colors, then it knows that that's warning that the caterpillar is poisonous. It knows not to eat this caterpillar because it is poisonous and it will make the bird sick to the tummy. And of course, they use this strategy all throughout every single stage of their life cycle. If you imagine their chrysalis, it's bright green and it has a gold band right across the top of it. And this gold band, it warns the same thing. It's really, really brightly colored to warn predators to back off because I'm no good to eat. And of course, the butterfly is a wonderful example of this. So the monarch butterfly, look at how absolutely bright orange this butterfly is. This doesn't help the butterfly to stay hidden like some animals use to protect themselves. But when a bird sees this and all these bright colors, this signals to the bird that the butterfly is poisonous and the bird probably wants to back off because it is no good to eat. So we call this Semantism, and that is how these monarch caterpillars and monarch chrysalises and monarch butterflies protect themselves against predators in the wild. And it's not just these guys that will use Semantism to protect themselves. Actually, beetles like milkweed beetles, we found a couple earlier. They're bright red beetles. They also feed on milkweed, and they do the absolute same thing. There were these really, really bright red colors because they store toxins from the milkweed plant inside their body, and their bright, bright red colors help advertise that they're poisonous to any potential predators so they don't get eaten. So that is a pretty smart thing to do, I think, and it worked out pretty well for these guys. Now, of course, these guys, that's not the only thing cool about them, so why don't I turn it over to Jenny? She could tell you more about these monarch butterflies. Alright, so with monarchs, one of the most iconic things I think about them is their migration. A lot of people have heard about it before. It's one of the longest migrations for insects and it's pretty special. And it all starts with an adult monarch butterfly. Because not all adult monarch butterflies live the same life. You know, a monarch that's emerged in the summer, for example, they live typically around anywhere from 2 to 5 weeks, and their purpose is reproduction. So they'll be mating and they'll lay eggs. Those eggs become new caterpillars, and they don't live very much longer than that. So they're not around for too long. But the monarchs that emerge in the fall, so we'll call these fall monarchs, they actually live a much longer life, anywhere from around 8 to 9 months, which is significantly longer. That's like saying if you were a human and you were born in June, you will live to maybe 70 years old. And if you were born in August, maybe you'll live to 1,000 years old. So it's a pretty huge difference. And these fall monarchs, they live so much longer because of their hormones. So when they emerge, instead of being preoccupied with reproduction, they have a different purpose. They actually go into what we call reproductive diapause. That's pushing the pause button on their reproductive needs, and they go on their big migration. So fly all the way down south, and they'll hit places like Mexico very famously, or the coast of California, where they'll overwinter. And they'll fly during the day, so you'll see them during the fall. Lots of monarchs moving through. And at night, they'll actually roost together, maybe in trees along the migration path. So that's a pretty spectacular sight too. And they'll stay the winter in these spots, these special overwintering spots. But it's not the same monarch that makes its way back up in the spring. Because what ends up happening is, in the springtime, as days get warmer and a little bit longer, around February, those adult monarchs overwintering start to get a little bit more active. And by March, they'll begin the journey back up. So they'll fly a little bit, but they don't make it all the way back up. What happens is they'll get a little bit of the way up and they'll stop. And then they unpause their reproductive needs and they'll mate and make eggs and produce a whole new generation of monarchs. And now these new monarchs, this new generation, will travel a bit further, and then they'll stop, and then they'll lay eggs, and then produce another generation. And these different generations keep bunny hopping themselves as they slowly make their way up. So the monarchs that we get back here in the spring are not the same monarchs that go down south in the winter, but maybe their grandchildren, which is pretty incredible. They've never been here before, but they somehow make their way back up. So that's kind of the story of monarch migration, a pretty amazing natural phenomena. And like we said a little bit earlier in the video, these guys are endangered. So we definitely can do a lot of things to help them in the wild, but also with their migration. So a lot of important things for them, for helping conserve them, is with habitat protection. So they're overwintering grounds, those forests in Mexico and California. We definitely want to be protecting those. We want to make sure that they have a place to go when they need to escape our very harsh winters. And another important thing is making sure they have enough food. So that means planting lots of native flowers for those adult butterflies to feed on. Remember, they need a lot of energy in the summer for reproduction and in the fall for their big journey. But not only do we want native flowers for the adults to eat, but we also want to be planting lots of native milkweed. So what's native will depend on what area you're from. If you're a little further down south along their route on their migration, it'll be different than what we have up north. But we want to make sure we're planting native milkweed because we want to make sure when those generations of monarchs start bunny hopping their way back up on their migration in the spring, that those baby caterpillars have food to eat. Otherwise, that first generation won't make it all the way back up. So those are a couple things that we can do right at home, which is really easy and super amazing. Monarchs are beautiful, or milkweed I should say, is a beautiful plant to have around, and they attract some beautiful caterpillars and butterflies. But there is also other projects that are involved with conservation. For example, here at the Arboretum, we tag butterflies. So what that looks like is if we see a monarch butterfly, we can catch them, and then we can put a little sticker on them. And this sticker has a special number that's specific now for that butterfly. We'll enter the data for this butterfly to this number into a big database, you know, where we caught this butterfly, when we caught this butterfly, and then we'll release this butterfly. And eventually if somebody recatches it, they can look at that number and they can track where it's gone, how far it's traveled, whether it's still alive. And that's really important for monitoring populations out in the wild. And it's a pretty cool thing as well. So thank you guys so much for joining us on our little journey into the life of a monarch butterfly, and we'll see you guys next week.